Hey everyone, I'm Kim, the mom boss behind EmeryandK. Welcome back to my channel. 'Tis the season for holiday tumblers, and in today's tutorial, I cannot wait to show you guys how to create this Christmas-inspired Serape tumbler using tree cake printed vinyl. Let's get to it. The first thing we're going to do is get our Serape template cut out on our Tacky tape. That's a double-sided adhesive sheets from the glitter guy. I love these things. They have no static, so super easy to glitter. I'm going to grab my ruler and I'm going to measure the two thickest strips. Then I'm going to head to Design Space. I'm going to create two squares. I'm going to unlock them so I can make them into rectangles. So the first is 9.5 by 1.375, and then the smaller is 9.5 by 0.80. I'm going to go ahead and cut both of those rectangles out of my printed vinyl. Now we're going to grab our Serape template and wrap our tumbler. I'm using the 20-ounce Skinny Classic from Stainless Depot. This one's a little bit bigger than the regular 20 Skinny, so my template's a little bit short, but that's okay. I like to wrap it around my cup, get it lined up, hold it in place with a few sewing clips, and then just remove the backing and carefully use my vinyl squeegee to wrap it around my tumbler. Now the seam is going to be covered with paint, like I said, so don't worry if it's not perfect. It's totally fine. Nobody's going to notice. Now we're going to go ahead and grab our printed vinyl that we cut. And I'm going to use my weeding tool and just remove one of those two thicker strips that we measured earlier to apply our printed vinyl. Now it is important to remove that tacky tape strip before you put your vinyl on, and you'll kind of see as I wrap here, I'm going to line up the edge. I don't do this fancy, I just kind of use my wrist to stick it to so it's not kind of free floating around. But it's important to remove that paper from your tacky tape and expose the adhesive, because as you can see here, going around my tumbler, putting on this printed vinyl, I sometimes have to pull it up a little bit to reposition it. If I hadn't removed my paper, it would actually rip the paper underneath, and that would be stuck to your vinyl, but then there would still be some stuck to your tacky tape, and you would have to remove the whole strip of vinyl and start over again. So just do it the easy way, remove that backing, and then go in and carefully apply your strip of vinyl. Now when you get to the end, like I said, the seam's going to be covered up, so you can just leave your vinyl if it overlaps a little bit, or I'm just going to go ahead and trim it, and then we will go ahead and do the other thicker strip on our template with our printed vinyl rectangle, and it's just the same exact process. We're going to carefully wrap it around, then go ahead and trim it at the end, and then once we've gotten both of our vinyl strips on, we're going to go ahead and move on to the glittering. As always, when we glitter on these templates, we want to do darkest to lightest. So I'm going to start with Gemerald, I think is how you say it, 11 ruby slippers, and those look similar in the shakers, but I promise on your tumbler you'll be able to tell they're different. Reagan's Illness, and then Dragon Ice, which is a gorgeous white with like a red and green shimmer. So I did speed up the video on the glittering part. The best part about this template is it's super straightforward. Like I said, we're going to start with our darkest color, and then we're going to move through all of our glitters to our lightest. And so I'm just removing like 4 or 5 little strips to glitter each color. I don't really do a pattern, I just go random. I just kind of let my brain do its thing. The only thing I try to pay attention to here, because 11 and Ruby Slippers are both a metallic red, they are different, you'll see that on the tumbler, but I don't want to put them as neighbors, just so that I kind of have that red spread out. And then a similar kind of process with Reagan's Illness, which is our other green. I want to kind of spread out my reds and my greens, but other than that, I don't really think too much about this when I'm glittering, and you shouldn't either. Just let that creative brain take over and just go for it. There's no right or wrong as far as putting on your stripes. If you want to do a pattern, more power to you, but I like to just let my brain relax and just go for it. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish applying our last couple glitters, and then I'm going to take my tumbler and I'm going to give it 2 really good coats of my Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss sealer. I want to make sure I seal it really well, because I don't want any of my reds or my greens mixing into that Dragon Ice, because I really want to keep it just that pure white with the color shimmer. So Make sure you give it 2 thin coats. Don't go too thick. You don't want any runs. And then after that, we'll go ahead and let it dry. Usually about a half an hour is what I do. And then we will go ahead and put a coat of epoxy on our tumbler. And then once that's cured, we'll move on to the next step. I'm going to apologize in advance for this terrible video, but it was pouring rain outside and I was being lazy and did not want to go back upstairs and get my little tripod to hold my phone, so I just propped it up in my basement. So anyway, I'm gonna go in with Color Shots Sugar Coat It, and I'm just going to spray a strip over that seam. So this is just a couple inches wide. I kind of do like about 3 inches and then kind of fade out the edges. You can see here I'm keeping my can far away, doing light little spritzes. I want to almost ombre out the edges of that spray paint, but don't worry if it's not perfect, because we're going to add a little bit of sparkle to our tumbler. So you guys, if you've seen my tutorials, know I'm obsessed with adding the ultra white mica powder into my epoxy. So I did add a good little blop here, but this is going to go on, I think I had like 5 or 6 cups that I was doing with this cup of epoxy. So typically if I'm doing just one tumbler, I will have 2 or 3 tablespoons of epoxy and just do a little bit of a sprinkle. But because I'm doing so many more with this cup of epoxy, I added, of course, more mica powder. So I'm just going to stir that in really well, and then I'm going to apply that to my tumblers. Now after I get the epoxy on my tumbler, I'm going to grab my Dragon Ice again. So this is that same white we used before. It has that really beautiful red and green shimmer. I'm going to take that and I'm going to lightly sprinkle it with my fingers just on the white paint. You can see that shimmer from the mica. It's so pretty. So I'm going to sprinkle it on that white paint. So I'm going to go a little bit heavier in the middle and then just sprinkle it out to the edges. I want just a little bit to kind of move over into the serape area of my tumbler, but not a lot. This is just to add a little bit more sparkle to this white space, because more glitter is always good. So I'm literally just dipping my fingers in and rubbing them together. My hand is about 12 inches away from my tumbler, and as I get closer to the edge of my paint, I'm going to move my hand even higher so that my sprinkle just gets a little bit lighter. And I'm going to continue to do this until I'm happy with how it looks. Put a little bit on the bottom. Then I'm going to put it back on my turner and I'm going to let it cure. I'll do one more coat of epoxy and then we can move on to the decals on our tumbler. Alright, so my decal I found on Etsy. It's from a shop called Tate Made Modern. I, of course, will link it down below. I thought it was super cute and really went with the vibe of the cup. So you get a couple different versions. You get a PNG and an SVG. I uploaded the SVG into Design Space. I added a 0.03 offset to it because you guys know I love to offset my decals. It did already come in 3 different colors, like split up as like a layered decal, I guess you would call it. So I decided to cut it out of a red and then a darker green and a lighter green that coordinated with my glitter colors. And so we're going to start by applying our offset. Of course, we are going to measure so that we get it on nice and straight, because nobody wants a crooked decal and nobody wants to have to peel this decal off and recut it, reweed it, and reapply it. That's just a total pain. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure I measure. I'm going to use, I think it's a hinge method, is what it's called, to apply this. I'm not really sure, but I just leave an extra piece of my transfer tape stuck to my tumbler so my decal stays nice and straight, remove my backing, push it down in the middle, and then on each of the sides, and our offset is applied. If you have seen any of my other videos, you know that I layer my decal in kind of an untraditional way. I do it word by word. And I'm sorry, you're going to see a lot of my head and my gray hairs in this part, but it is so hard to layer a decal like correctly with a big light and a camera right in front of your face. So I had to get in like close, and sometimes my head just gets in the camera. So sorry about that. But as you can see here, I just go one word at a time. These little stars, I'm just placing one at a time. I prefer to layer my decal this way because I can get my little pieces on straight every single time. I am not very good at layering the entire decal at once, or like layering all 3 of these colors and then putting it on my decal. I'm just not good at that. If you're good at that, you're amazing, but I am just not. So I do each piece individually and each word individually, and that just works really well for me. So I'm going to go ahead, finish applying this decal, and then we are going to head and do a little bit more epoxy and some more glitter. So after getting my decal on my tumbler, I thought the space around it needed a little something extra. So we're going to go in with some chunky glitter. I'm going to be using Spruce, Willis, and Mushu. Those are both from the Glitter Guy. I'm going to dump a little bit of each onto my paper here. I want about a 50-50 mix. I was just being a little bit lazy and I didn't want to have to sprinkle one color at a time. But if you wanted to sprinkle one color at a time, by all means do that. Or you could be lazy like me and just mix a little bit on your paper. So as I sprinkle on this glitter, I'm going to focus kind of first just getting a little bit of a cascade on here. So I am just dipping my fingers in. I'm holding them about 8 to 10 inches away from my tumbler. You can see I have my tumbler tilted away from my fingers, and I'm just rubbing my fingers together so that the glitter that's on them will just lightly sprinkle onto my tumbler. Very similar to how we applied our Dragon Eyes to this white space earlier. So I'm just going to do a light sprinkle, and then I'm going to go in very close to my tumbler. As you can see, my fingers are just a couple inches away, and do a little bit thicker on that very top and that very bottom rim, so we get that kind of like ombre effect, but not super ombre, just so that it's a little bit lighter as it goes towards the middle of the cup. Now I'm going to go ahead and grab this little popsicle stick. I'm going to move any chunky pieces off of the decal that I don't want there. As this spins, since the epoxy is self-leveling, the chunky will move a little bit. You might end up with a piece here or there on your decal, which is totally fine. I just didn't want a ton of glitter on my decal. I'm going to use this popsicle stick to fix. I had like this little bloop of chunky, so I spread that out a little bit. I don't mind a little bit kind of falling onto my Serape, but I didn't want a ton. So I'm just using this popsicle stick to manipulate this chunky glitter to where I want it. Once I am happy with the placement of my chunky glitter, I'm going to put it back on my turner, and I'm going to go ahead and let it cure. Once this layer of epoxy cures, I'm going to give it a coat of my Rust-Oleum 2 times clear gloss, and then I will give it one more coat of epoxy, and my cup will be finished. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you found this tutorial helpful, maybe a little bit inspirational. If you did, I would love a thumbs up on my video. If you want to see more tutorials in the future, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy crafting.